serve in their several offices through Jesus Christ our Lord. O Lord, our God, who are the lover of justice and truth, give thy grace to our Parliament and to all who direct the affairs of our nation, and guide them by thy Holy Spirit, we beseech thee, that by word and deed they may promote the well-being of this people and set forward peace among all men through Jesus Christ our Lord. Let us together say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
The session is now in session. The Senate is now in session. Alliteration gets me into trouble all the time.
Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General.
Very far now. I have two messages from Her Excellency. First, dated November 10th, 2020, reads as follows. Dear Mr. President, I have the honor to inform that I shall be away from office during the period 14th to 21st November 2020 on vacation leave. In accordance with the provisions of sections 29(1)(a) of the Constitution, Sir Kenneth Rudolph Hewitt, K.A.C.B.E.B.J.H., will perform the functions of the Office of Governor General during my absence. As the Honorable the Senate will not be meeting prior to the start of my vacation leave, it will not be possible for the usual formal message to be sent to your chamber. Will you therefore please bring my absence formally to the attention of the Honorable the Senate when next it meets? I have the honor to be yours faithfully, Governor General. The second message from Her Excellency reads as follows. Her Excellency the Governor General to the Honorable the Senate. Her Excellency the Governor General has the honor to inform the Honorable the Senate that, in accordance with Section 36(4) of the Constitution, Mr. Julian Alvin Hunt has been appointed to be a member of the Senate with effect from 16th October 2020. Signed, the Governor General.
You want to invite him now?
Yeah. 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 It's my understanding that Senator Hunt is present for today's sitting. Mr. Marshall, will you please admit him? Senator Hunt. Please take your seat. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Honorable the Senate. This is a very long-standing and distinguished chamber, and we are pleased as your colleagues to welcome you to this session. We look forward with great excitement and enthusiasm to your contributions. Your interested and diverse background should add to the richness of the debate and deliberation in the chamber, and you can certainly count on the support of all of us as your colleagues, and in particular the clerks at the table, who are very well regarded, very expert in parliamentary matters, and will ensure that you step off on the right foot. So welcome. I wish you a long and successful tenure in this honorable and distinguished chamber. Senator McConnell.
Mr. President, on behalf of the government senators, I wish to welcome Senator Hunt to this honorable chamber. We certainly look forward, sir, to the level of respect and decorum with which we have conducted our business over the last period during this session, certainly, and we look forward to continuing to work and collaborate and receive your contributions and debate in a way that will do service to this country and to this parliament.
Senator Franklin.
Mr. President, thank you. It would be remiss of me if I did not welcome Senator Hunt to this chamber. I do so as opposition representative here on behalf of the opposition, but I also do so in my own regard. Senator Hunt, like me, comes from a long tradition. No, this is Combermere, and so I'm welcoming your brother. But we have more than that in common. He, to my knowledge, he is a good trade unionist, and I wish I could say that about others. But I know that he will live up to the expectations that the Governor General has reposed in him. But we have more in common than that. He's from Rock Hall. I'm from Rock Hall. Mind you, Rock Hall St. Andrew, Rock Hall St. Thomas, but Rock Hall nonetheless. You know, so we are coming from a good start. I know him as a trade unionist more so than anything else, because I was at school years before he was there. I think it was before he was born. But you can rest assured, if he brings the type of representation to this place as he did as a trade unionist, we will be more than rich for it. He is an excellent representative, and I'm sure he will bring that type of representation here. Sir, welcome, Senator Hunt. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Franklin. Senator Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President, for acknowledging my request. On behalf of the senators appointed by Her Excellency, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our colleague who joins us here in the quest of seeking to bring that nonpartisan perspective to the debates that engage this honorable House. I have had the distinct, let's not call it pleasure, I've had the distinct experience of knowing Senator Hunt from '93. It may come as a surprise to many, but I actually spent some of my formative years in Trinidad. I know that's a bit shocking. When I came back to Barbados in '93, I was positioned to attend a certain institution, whereupon I chanced upon the young man who now joins us in this chamber, and the welcome which I received was somewhat guarded, but over the course of the years, we developed a friendship. And in that friendship, I can attest, Mr. President, that he is loath to rush. He will speak his mind, and I think will be quick to give rejoinder to any thrust that comes his way. Wish to welcome him. I wish to apologize for my absence when he was sworn in. I was unwell, but I was there supporting virtually. and look forward to hearty debate in this House. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator White. I can only conclude based on the last few contributions that the Senate can only go up and on. Yes, sir. I could have helped myself. I could have helped myself. Senator Hunt.
Sir, I'm given to understand that on occasions like this, what is expected of me is that I should say thank you for the warm welcome, and that I should commit myself to behaving myself consistently with the rich traditions that have attended this chamber. And it is in that grain, and in the grain of those who have sat where I sit, that I am honored to carry on the work that they have done on behalf of the trade union movement and those who practice or are otherwise involved in industrial relations in this country. I am happy to join this honorable chamber at this time, in this capacity, at a time when the labor relations landscape of our country, I don't know if I should say it is in flux, but it certainly is going through some change. November this year, a time when Barbadians would have preferred if the hardest thing they had to contemplate was whether they wanted their conkeys with or without raisins. Too many members of the working class have had to find themselves on the sidewalks, remonstrating their inability to access severance pay entitled to them, that they're entitled to, which is owed to them. And in that regard, I would say to those people, should they be fortunate enough to receive those payments from wherever it comes, severance money is peculiar. It does not last. And they should be mindful that there's going to be life after Christmas. And I'm joining the Senate at this time when too many Barbadians are finding it difficult to have even reasonable access to labor relations advice at work, because there seems to be a system of rollback of the gains that have been won by labor over the decades. I'm aware that there are those who think that the current rumblings by the recently disenfranchised people may be sending a message to the international community that we may not prefer, such that we may be perceived as being not such a good choice as a destination for work or pleasure. But I can reach back to experiences where I have been part of action on Broad Street, pursuing the cause of workers on a Wednesday when cruise ships were making their calls, and dozens of tourists passed, gave us thumbs up, showed us tattoos of their own unions back home, recognizing that it was the membership and support of their unions back home that put them in a position of being able to choose Barbados as a destination. So, as the new social and economic storms come down on the working class in Barbados, one of the key messages I hope to make in my time here is that labor must be cognizant of how it is perceived, and it must find itself presenting to the world a unified front. A unified front, hopefully, under a trade union umbrella. An umbrella which needs the constituent members as much as the constituent members need that umbrella. So with these few words of self-introduction, Mr. President, I hope I have permitted some view of that which will guide my work in this chamber. and I'm obliged to you for the opportunity to make these words.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Your initial speech sounds very much like your 100th speech. Thank you. You sound as if you have been here before. Thank you very much, Senator Boyce. Senator Hunt, sorry.
Announcements by Your Honor, the President.
I have a few announcements. First of all, some relation to absences and lateness of senators. We have apologies for lateness from Senator Rudy Grant and our leader of government business, Senator Dr. Jerome Walcott. In terms of absences, first of all, our chaplain is Reverend Wayne Curtin is unavoidably absent, and we have apologies for absence from Senator Lucille Moore, who is overseas. Wait a minute. We have as well, to be confirmed, minutes of our sit-ins of September 15th, 30th, and October 16th. Senator Bonhoney.
Mr. President, I beg to confirm the minutes of September 15th, 2020, of September 30th, 2020, and of October 16th, 2020.
Honourable Senators, the minutes have been circulated, and unless there are any observations, errors, omissions, we ask for the confirmation. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. The minutes so cited stand confirmed.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Mr. President, I'm commanded to lay the following: the annual report and audited financial statement of the Barbados Port, Inc. for the financial year ended March 31st, 2018. The annual report and audited financial statement of the Barbados Port, Inc. for the financial year ended March 31st, 2019. The audited financial statements of the Caribbean Aircraft Handling Company Limited for the financial year ended March 31st, 2018, and the audited financial statements of the Caribbean International Airways Limited for the financial year ended March 31st, 2019.
Reports from select committees, questions to ministers, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, motions related to the business or sittings of the Senate, and moved by a minister.
Senator Bonhoney.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 45.2 so that this honorable chamber may complete the Central Bank of Barbados Bill 2020 in all of its stages.
The question is that Standing Order 45.2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Standing Order stands so suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
Introduction of bills.
Senator McConnell.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of the resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the vesting in the Barbados Tourism Investment, Inc., a company incorporated under the Companies Act, Cap 308, of the parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situate at Bay Street in the parish of St. Michael in this island, more particularly described in the schedule to this resolution, for the public purpose of tourism development. I also wish, Mr. President, to give notice of the Pesticides Control Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, I further ask that the Pesticides Control Amendment Bill 2020 and the Central Bank of Barbados Bill be read a first time.
The question is that the Pesticides Control Bill and the Central Bank Amendment Bill be read the first time. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Public business, sir.
Government business is now the order of the day.
Order number 3. In the name of the Honorable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Central Bank of Barbados Bill 2020.
Senator McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to introduce the Central Bank of Barbados Bill, aware that it has been some time in coming, and happy indeed that this current government has been able to deliver it to this honorable House today. As you are aware, sir, a revised Central Bank of Barbados Bill was settled in draft by the Central Bank of Barbados in or about March of 2018, after about 9 years. That draft included changes emanating from the 2008 and 2013 IMF Financial Sector Assessment Program. And shortly after that bill was settled, sir, you may recall that Parliament was dissolved in preparation for the general elections of 2018. As is the norm, sir, and as were advised by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, the revised Central Bank of Barbados Bill was considered after the elections was held by the new cabinet of the time. And you will also recall, sir, that immediately after that consideration, that the government of Barbados would have entered arrangements with the International Monetary Fund for this country to enter into an extended fund facility. Now, one of the structural benchmarks of that extended fund facility, the EFF, was for a revision of the Central Bank of Barbados Act. And it is in pursuit of this, sir, that the IMF's Safeguards Assessment Team, along with senior members of the Central Bank, they met and they discussed further changes to that draft that had been previously made before the elections. And there were additional changes that were proposed at that time, including those that would impact the governance framework for the central bank, the institutional autonomy, and the limits of financing that could be provided to government. Subsequent discussions, sir, then led to further amendments that would better reflect the legislative practices of this Barbados. And so with all of that as a background, the rationale for this bill, sir, is to strengthen the central bank's governance and its operational autonomy, basically its independence, and while they are managing accountability. It is also, sir, to ensure the compliance of the central bank with international financial reporting standards and other related matters. Sir, I am going to take this opportunity to go through parts of this bill that might be of import in terms of us understanding where it is seeking to take us. As you know, Barbados, and certainly this government, has been seeking to ensure that there is greater discipline brought to our fiscal management, our economic management, and certainly to ensure that the structures and the policies that are, and the laws that are in place to ensure that we manage the finances of this country responsibly. Part 2, sir, incorporates the objectives and the functions of the central bank. Clause 6 in particular, sir, it speaks to the primary objective of the central bank being to maintain the value of the Barbados currency. And that a secondary objective is that of promoting financial stability that is conducive to the orderly and sustained economic development of Barbados. The broad functions, sir, can be found at Clause 7. In Part 3 of this bill, sir, It provides for the treatment of capital, profits, and reserves. As you know, sir, the capital is basically the resources that the bank puts up to operate. You know that the profit, sir, is just what it says. It is the profits. It is not unusual for central banks to make profit. In fact, it is unusual for them not to. And so, of course, it speaks to how they are to be treated. And then, of course, it speaks to reserves. Reserves, sir, is the amount of funds that institutions which put deposits in the central bank must hold in reserve in order to back up the deposits that are in their own respective institutions. And so this part 3 speaks to those 3 in particular. Clause 7 I will deal with. It deals with authorized capital, which shall be fully paid up and shall be increased from 5 million to 25 million. Currently, paid up capital is 2 million, and it provides for the difference to be paid up and authorized for that the difference between what is paid up and what is authorized, that it be funded out of the annual profits of the central bank. It also, this part 3, speaks to a number of different issues as it relates to domestic debt restructuring in terms of capital deficiency. There was a capital deficiency, you will recall, sir, when we restructured Barbados's debt in excess of 1.6 million. There was a capital deficiency with the central bank in excess of 1.6 million, and the government has committed to develop a recapitalization plan by the end of December in order to deal with that. Basically, sir, what this means is that there was a mismatch between the assets and the liabilities that exist, and what this recapitalization plan will seek to do is to bring that to rights in a way that makes sense. You will understand, sir, too, that this part of the bill deals with distributable earnings upon validation of the bank's financial statement. And if we are just to break that down with all of the other elements that relate to it, it sets out the requirements for a flow of funds to and from government with regards to the central bank. For example, there are thresholds that are set that says what level of profits the central bank will be able to keep. So let's just say, for example, that threshold is set at 30 million. It says that everything that the central bank makes up to 30 million, it keeps. Anything it would make over that amount, it then will pass to government. So you understand then that the money that the central bank would keep in this situation would be used to reinvest in itself and to, invest in its technology and other aspects. Now, I use that number. Please do not say that that is the correct number. I simply use it for illustrative purposes to help understand what we're talking about. That's those distributable earnings. It is important to note, too, as we talk about monies that go back and forth to government, that the debt restructuring bonds, which were issued to the central bank at the time when Barbados restructured our debt, that it is those bonds that's allowing right now our central bank to be able to make profit. The intention of the recapitalization plan that I spoke about earlier is to ensure that the central bank can do so more sustainably without necessarily the propping up from those bonds. So there is significant work that we're seeking to do to put the central bank on a very good footing to be able to manage its capitalization, its profits, and its reserves in a manner that is sustainable. Part 4, sir, of this bill provides for administrative arrangements for the bank, in particular for 2 decision-making bodies of the central bank, one being the board of the central bank and the other being the executive committee of the central bank. The executive committee is made up of the governor and the 2 deputy governors, and that has responsibility for monetary policy and other management issues. And of course, you have the board that has general oversight of the bank. One of the things that we want to ensure, sir,
is that the executive committee continues to deal in monetary policy, that government continues to work with fiscal policy, and that they do not, in fact, that government does not, in fact, seek to influence what is happening in the bank unnecessarily. And certainly the arrangements that are made in this bill are meant to make sure that there's prudence and that there is a responsible and appropriate type of roles as it relates to the governance of the bank. There is also an aspect in this part, sir, that relates to the double veto in the appointment of the governor. What does that mean in very simple language? In one situation, the Minister of Finance may recommend the governor of the central bank, but that Minister of Finance must also go to the head of state, by whatever name, by the Governor General or other, that they will go to the head of state to be able to convince that head of state as well of the prudence of that appointment, and they must agree in order to confirm that appointment. Equally, sir, there are similar provisions for being able to remove a governor. And there are very clear circumstances extended here in which a governor can be removed, but that double veto provides additional protection for the governor in this regard. And some of the circumstances under which a governor may be considered for removal is that where he's unfit, he or she is unfit or is otherwise incapable of carrying out duties, where they're guilty of some serious misconduct in carrying out of their duties, where there's a breach of board-approved policies, or where the governor has contravened certain specified sections of the Act or has acted contrary to the objectives and functions, some of which I outlined earlier and that are captured in clauses 6 and 7. And again, as I said, there is additional protection for the governor in that you have the double veto where the minister and the head of state must consult in that regard. Now, clause number 6, part 6, I should say, of this bill, it speaks to the greater flexibility in the management of international reserves. Given the international investment environment, it is really quite a dynamic environment. So what does that mean in very simple terms, really? This is really standard when it comes to central banks. And basically this part, it outlines the role of the central bank as a clearinghouse and the settler of all transactions with other central banks. And this includes those transactions related to acting on behalf of a government when we get loans, etc., as well as other transactions that will come up as a result and require settlement between central banks where we have foreign currency, etc. So for example, sir, let me just illustrate it simply. Say we imported $5 million in goods from Trinidad, and then we sold $4 million in goods to Trinidad. Now, clearly now, in a situation like that, it means, and say that the settlement, the currency settlement was US dollars for those it would mean, sir, that Trinidad will owe us about $1 million. Now, this is the situation where central banks start to central banks, and they're settled that situation. It is not done necessarily on a transaction-to-transaction basis, maybe a series of transactions. And it might mean that last month it was the opposite. Well, this month, this is what it is. So the central banks over time and through the processes that they have, they are able to reconcile those transactions and decide who is going to pay what to whom at what point. So this part speaks specifically to the role that the central bank plays in settling those transactions. Now, part 8 of the bill, sir, I want to draw your attention. This bill gives the central bank increased operational authority. It allows the bank to open accounts for non-bank financial institutions. Basically, sir, in all of the clauses that you will find in this part, it pretty much speaks to the role of the central bank to be the lender of last resort and to basically protect depositors when we boil down all that section is speaking about at this point in time. Sir, this bill also speaks to the role of the central bank in helping to address the fiscal risk in terms of the enhanced credit guarantee scheme which we have and the housing credit fund. Basically, the role of that the central bank has to play is to facilitate these guarantees for those schemes. And this section, of course, speaks to this part of the bill speaks to that. We talked earlier, sir, about the increased discipline that we need to exercise as a government to ensure that we are managing the financial and the fiscal and monetary affairs of this country in a proper manner. Clause 62 it makes provision for the limitations on monetary financing of the public sector, where the central bank may decide to finance emergencies. In other words, transfer money to the government in order to deal with national emergencies, national disasters, pandemics, etc. But that is limited now to 3% of the GDP. Basically, what we tend to do is to Sir, before I get to that section, I want to also speak about the advances on the Ways and Means accounts that remain to enable the bank to continue to make temporary advances to the government in the event of certain unforeseen disruptions that affect the government's cash flow. The intention, sir, is that we will continue to bring more certainty and discipline to the management of public finances. Basically, what we speak about when we say that the central bank, for example, almost operates for the government like how a bank would provide an overdraft for an individual. So, for example, if government has a certain cash flow issues, the central bank can provide a certain type of overdraft facility. And that is limited to 7.5% of average government revenue over the last 3 years. So what you do is you calculate what the average government revenue was over the last 3 years, and you ensure that what the central bank can then provision to government does not exceed 7.5% of that. This bill also envisages, Mr. President, that the bank will have the autonomy to carry out its functions without inappropriate interventions from government. And there is provision here, you will notice, sir, for the minister to consult with the bank on macroeconomic policies of the bank, and where the minister is of the view that these policies of the bank are not adequate or conducive to the achievement of the objectives of the bank, and that the minister may issue an order to the bank that states a macroeconomic policy to be adopted by the bank in respect of policies. And this entire section governs how that is to be done in a way that ensures that the interference is not unwarranted in any significant way. Part 10 of this bill, Mr. President, speaks to the role of the chief internal auditor for the rotation of external auditors. So it means that there is a timed rotation of auditors to ensure that auditors are in no way feeling as if they will be there indefinitely and would feel in any way pressure to provide any particular slant to their audits. In fact, it really and truly ensures that there is it's a more open and a more transparent process as it relates to the auditing function with regards to the central bank. Then, sir, part 11. It speaks to it being mandatory for persons to supply information requested to the bank, and that if they do not do so, that their failure to do so would be punishable by prosecution and penalties. This section therefore seeks to capture and codify the requirement to respond to balance of payment surveys, especially that the banks send out from time to time. You will recall, sir, that I said earlier that when the bank settles with other central banks, that is a role that our central bank plays, that central banks generally play. But when they send out a balance of payment survey on what people are spending the money on. And what has happened in the past is that some entities have chosen to ignore it, and some people have not responded. What it now does, it brings greater discipline to the act of them responding to that particular request. Finally, sir, as I seek to look at the other critical parts of this bill, I want to speak to the sections also that speak to the fact that the bank is to prepare its financials strictly in accordance with international financial reporting standards. And that is something that was certainly highlighted by the number of assessments that have been made, and it is important that if Barbados is to maintain its credibility and its reputation, that we are to do so by ensuring that the standards are kept. Mr. President, there are many more important provisions made by this bill, but I believe that I have highlighted some of the most critical at this point in time. And it is with these few words that I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator McConnell. Senator Drakes.
Thank you, Mr. President. First off, I'd like to thank the Acting Leader of Government Business for a somewhat thorough review of what is somewhat of an extensive bill. And there are a number of changes to the legal framework now of the central bank. Like the Acting Leader of Government Business, I'd like to highlight what I view as some of the major changes and some observations as I went through the bill. And sir, what I'll ask your permission to read some of these, because sometimes the devil is in the details. And I wouldn't want to say the wrong things as I go through some of these changes.
Proceed, Senator Drakes.
Thank you, sir. So the first change, and the Acting Leader of Government Business spoke to this, and that is in Clause 7, where the change of the authorized capital is moving now from, in the Principal Act, from 5 million to 25 million. And I'm happy to hear that the government is working on the recapitalization of the central bank, because, sir, as you know, under the debt restructuring the government embarked on, the central bank lost $1.5 billion. 1.5 billion. I think I heard million in the first contribution, but it is $1.5 billion. And therefore, that would obviously have some impact on the central bank's balance sheet. And in the other place, the Minister of Finance would have said that the government is working with the IMF to come up with a plan on how to recapitalize the central bank. And now we are hearing that it may be in December. I don't know if that's December 2020 or December 2021, but clarity there would also be a good thing so that we know when that plan is to come into play. Sir, I move on to Clause 38, Section 1, parity of the Barbados dollar. And forgive me if I am referring to a Principal Act that is outdated, because we are not sent the most updated Principal Act that we are repealing. This is the one I found on the government's website. Clause 38, though Section 1, speaks to the parity of the Barbados dollar. And it states now that the par value of the Barbados dollar shall be $1 Barbados to 50 cents in the currency of the United States of America, and any change thereof shall be determined by the minister by order after consultation with the bank. In the Principal Act, before, the parity of the Barbados dollar, it states, the par value of the Barbados dollar shall be 444,335 grams of fine gold, and any change thereof shall be determined by the minister after consideration and recommendation of the bank. And sir, we know that the Barbados dollar is obviously pegged to the US dollar, but having it now in the legal framework of the bill obviously makes it, there's some validity now to it in terms of the legal framework. But sir, this has implications for the value of the Barbados dollar, given the amount of goods and services that we produce and how competitive we are versus what is happening in the United States. Because what can now happen is if Barbados continues on a trajectory where we are seeing low economic growth in terms of the output of goods and services and being pegged to an economy that is growing and robust, there would be some kind of artificial valuation happening with the Barbados dollar and how competitive we are in the global market. In addition, sir, forward-looking, it also has implications for the unfolding digital age that we find ourselves in. And I'm hoping the Honorable Senator on the other side, who is all things digital currency, can give some insight into this. But we have to also think about who will be the dominant players in relation to digital currency in the near future. We know that China is already moving steadily forward in rolling out a national digital currency. And it leaves me to wonder where the role of the central bank here in Barbados, how will they adapt to that changing environment, and as well as digital currencies that are not regulated by a central bank, like Bitcoin, who rely on decentralized systems such as blockchain that prevents any one person or organization from having control over the currency. But sir, another observation that I had as it relates to that section, and this is still now on the parity of the Barbados dollar, is we're including now in that section, section 3 states, any change in the par value prescribed under subsection 1 shall be subject to negative resolution and published in the official gazette. So therefore, we do not have a case where if that par value is changed, it is passed in both houses, the minister can change it by negative resolution. I find that quite interesting, Mr. President. But sorry, continue. Part 6 of the bill, and the acting leader of government business noted this as well. And it speaks to the maintenance of a reserve of external assets. And clause 40, section 5 states the bank shall use its best endeavors to maintain the reserves of external assets at an adequate level for the international transactions of Barbados. And where those reserves of external assets decline, and in the judgment of the executive committee, appear to be in danger of declining so as to jeopardize the fixed exchange rate, the executive committee shall submit to the minister a report on the reserve position and the causes which have led or may lead to the decline, and the recommendations and measures that it considers necessary to forestall or otherwise remedy the situation. What is being removed from the Principal Act is the bank shall, if this situation is occurring, shall make further reports and recommendations at intervals not exceeding 6 months until such time as, in the judgment of the board, the situation is rectified. If we're bringing greater transparency and accountability to the central bank, I'm wondering how come this new bill omits that section that was in the Principal Act. Sir, on many occasions, we've also heard about the level of international reserves being touted. And rightly so, the government has borrowed a lot of money to make these claims. In June 2020, this year, our gross international reserves were about $2 billion. I stand corrected if I'm wrong. That's the amount that I got from the central bank's last report. But net international reserves were around $1.5 billion. So what I find interesting is that we never hear about the amount of non-borrowed net international reserves. And for illustration, let me make the example. If you have $500, you work for $500, sir, and your commitments in terms of your expenses are $300, you really don't have $500, you have $200. And it gets even worse, Mr. President. If of that $500, $100 out of that comes from you borrowing money, you never really started with $500. And when you take out the $300 for expenses, you're not left with $200, you're left with $100 if you take into account the money that you've borrowed. So what we're hearing about is the $500, but we do not know the net position, taking out what we've already borrowed in the last 2.5 years. And so I think that that is an amount that we should know the position and we should know the trend, because reserves can be, the gross reserves can be on an upward trend, but the non-borrowed reserves can be on a downward trend. But if we're never told the position, or the ratio at least, then we are none less the wiser. Sir, and I bring that point, I bring up that point to make that illustration as well, because when you also look at what's happened in the Barbadian economy, we've lost about $1 billion due to the COVID disruptions. I believe as of June 2020, we were at $7.7 billion. When we look at the same reporting for last year, 2019, June 2019, we are about, we are at 6.6 this year, and last year we were at $7.7 billion. So we've lost $1 billion. And when you look at that on a per capita basis, every Barbadian on the island, if we assume 250,000 people, each person in Barbados has lost $4,000. So, sir, when we do not know the gravity of the situation, because numbers are not being expressed in a way that is transparent, and we have a clear picture of what has happened, sir, it is incumbent on the government to give a clear picture so persons understand the gravity of what is happening, Mr. President. Sir, I move on to part 9, relations with the government. Clause 62 speaks to the prohibition of monetary financing. And Section 6 of that clause states, notwithstanding any other provision to the contrary, the bank may make temporary advances to the government to permit the government to manage its cash flows. And this is where these changes get very interesting, Mr. President. It states where the bank makes temporary advances pursuant to subsection 6, the temporary advances shall be subject to the following conditions. The total aggregate amount cannot exceed at any time 7.5% of the annual average of the ordinary revenue of the government for the 3 fiscal years of the government immediately preceding for which accounts are available. And it goes on to say, where subsection 5 is invoked and the ordinary revenues of the government declines below that in the fiscal year of the government immediately preceding the public emergency, the bank may exclude such reduced revenue in the computation of the annual average in paragraph A. crafty, isn't it? Sir, what this is being changed from, and I stand corrected if it is, that section is now going to stand and repealing Section 59, subsection 2 of the Public Finance Management Act 2019. And sir, what is being repealed is this. Where the minister responsible for finance in a financial year, when authorized by resolution of Parliament for the purpose of meeting current requirements, borrows money from the central bank by means of temporary advances, the amount shall not exceed, still the same 7.5%, but it was of the net receipts of the estimated revenue of the government for that financial year. So instead of increasing the 7.5% that the government has placed a limit on, we have some crafty language that allows the government now to base that 7.5% on a 3-year average. And if it so happens that the revenues for that year are less than favorable due to a public emergency, then we don't have to count that year. The things, sir, that I find interesting in these amendments. But, sir, I suspect that given the reduction in revenues and the government finding itself in a very difficult position, which is happening globally, that's no secret, it may find itself in a difficult position in covering its recurring expenditures, and instead of increasing the 7.5% limit, it's legally trying now to access a greater amount of funds by changing the way in which that amount is calculated. Sir, in the event that that is the case, I think one of the things that we can be honest about is if we're going to go through the trouble of changing language and how things are calculated, there's a level of honesty that should come from the government if it does find itself in a position that it cannot cover recurring expenditure, and come to the people of Barbados and let them know that these very principles that they put in place in 2019, they now have to abandon because the financial situation is not one that can rely on those rules anymore. But again, sir, I said I stand corrected if what I am saying is wrong. But I am going off of what was given to me as well as what is in the Public Finance Management Act 2019. So, sir, clearly that particular section, despite the IMF borrowing that we've done, despite the BERT program, despite the BOSS program, and I will stand here and make no qualms about it, I voted for it. Despite the BEST program, we are still clearly trying to pass legislation that would somewhat put us back to where the government so affectionately calls the lost decade, where we may have to print money to cover recurring expenditure because it's making provisions for it in this bill. But, sir, in my opinion, because I don't want anyone to get up on a point of order that I'm misleading the House, so I'll say in my opinion, as I read the legislation, and given all that is happening now in Barbados, I think we're wasting the opportunity of this COVID-19 pandemic. The actual structural adjustments that we're supposed to be making to change the landscape of Barbados, both economic and socially, we have found ourselves in a circular conversation that is marked by things like by elections and whether if Barbados is to become a republic or not. But nonetheless, sir, There are things that are clearly manifesting itself in our society in terms of injustice that are so deeply rooted in how Barbados came to being and the exploitative nature by which our economy runs. We somehow don't want to address those things. And so as we wait for a V recovery or a W recovery, and for tourism to come back, because for all intents and purposes, the infrastructure of Barbados is all geared towards tourism. There are some across the globe who have woken up to the fact that neoliberal economics is on its last breath. It is. And I will say it in a way that the government may understand. It is no longer fit for purpose in the 21st century. But, sir, that is another conversation for another time. Sir, I move on to clause 63 as it relates to orders. The acting leader of government business noted that there were some changes here. And I read the clause to ensure that I'm being understood. It says, where the minister consults with the bank on the macroeconomic policies of the bank, and the minister is of the view that the macroeconomic policies of the bank are not adequate for or conducive to the achievement of the purposes of the bank, as set out at sections 6.1 and 6.2, the minister may issue an order to the bank that states a macroeconomic policy is to be adopted by the bank in respect of the purposes. My question when I read that, if we are including greater accountability, we're giving the central bank more authority, what happens when the governor or his executive committee disagrees with the government's macroeconomic policy, and how is their position ratified, even if it is to ensure the credibility of the governor and the board in the public's eye? Because there's still a social contract between the Central Bank of Barbados and the people of Barbados, not just the central bank and the government. There is no provision in the legislation that protects the governor and his committee if they disagree with the government. So, sir, we're saying that if there's a situation where there could be, because we are not all going to be here, the government of the day is not always going to be the government of the day. If it so happens that we have a minister who more or less does not have the credibility to make this type of action, how then does the Central Bank of Barbados counteract the Minister of Finance in the interests of ensuring stability of the Barbados economy? Sir, for me, this language reasserts the dominance of the political class in the functions of the organization, despite contrary to the objects and reasons. Because if you're saying that you're giving the bank greater autonomy, yet you're making no provisions to protect the governor or the executive committee, in the event that there is a disagreement, then I am left to wonder who is protecting the central bank in that situation. Because, sir, sometimes good economic policy is not always politically favorable. Sir, my last observation is in relation to Part 11, Clause 69, Section 1. And it states that the bank may issue reports and publications as the board considers to be of public interest. And, sir, I have no issue with that because there's some basic level of accountability, as I said, that the central bank will have to the public. And there's that social contract between the Central Bank of Barbados and the people of Barbados. And there are some key fundamental statistics that should be given to the public. And I say that, sir, because, for example, while going through this COVID-19 pandemic and all of the disruptions that it has caused, I am yet to hear an estimated figure for the rate of unemployment in Barbados.
I rise on a point of order.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I've been very patient and I've allowed the colleague senator to utter a number of things so far that are problematic and blatantly untrue. But I believe, Mr. Speaker, that on more than one occasion I have heard the minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs speak publicly on pretty much everything that has been refuted as never having been spoken of, including most recently on the unemployment rate in this country. And I would call on the honourable senator to stop misleading both the country and the House. Thank you.
Senator, please continue.
Sir, when I say what is the official rate of unemployment, both the bank's reports for the end of March and the end of June have not available. If anyone in this room can stand and give me the official rate of unemployment, I would be happy to hear what it is. I did not ask, Mr. President, how many unemployment claims came through the NIS. I asked, what is the rate of unemployment? Because what is clear is that stating that 40,000 NIS claims have been processed or gone through the NIS is not an accurate representation, because there are many persons who are no longer eligible for NIS. There are others who have gone back out to work. And then there are those who are not eligible for NIS, who were working before COVID, who are still without a means of income.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order again.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, I'm so sorry. Mr. President, on a point of order. Mr. Speaker, on a point of order again. On more than one occasion, I repeat, the government has spoken about the rate of unemployment. I'm fairly certain that I have heard the unemployment rate as at March. I'm certain I've heard the unemployment rate as at October, and that has been made public. I would call on the honourable senator to stop misleading the House.
Mr. President, I call then on the honourable member to please enlighten me of all of those rates that she has heard, the honourable member has heard, because I, along with many others in the public domain, have not heard the official rate of unemployment, Mr. President. So, sir, that, as I said, is my last observation. And I say that because I find it deeply troubling that if we do not know something as simple as the unemployment rate, then government is devising policy without sound data. Sir, some people are estimating that the employment rate is 40%. Some people are saying it could be higher. I do not know the number. That is why I'm asking. If the rate is less than 40% as being touted by non-official statistics, let me put that as a clause then, by non-official statistics, then what could be happening is government may be placing resources in areas which it could be doing otherwise, or placing somewhere else where they could be better utilized. So, sir, I end then by asking, and I really do not want to do this, but clearly then it is a point of contention, but I'll ask it, because it seems I will get an answer. What is the official rate of unemployment in Barbados? 1, and 2, what is the rate of youth unemployment in Barbados? Mr. President, I thank you so much for your patience and your attention this afternoon.
Thank you, Senator Drakes. Senator Dr. Holder.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I wish to lend support to the bill before us this afternoon. You will forgive me, Mr. President, if I take a few seconds to gather my thoughts after hearing the diatribe that I had to listen to a few moments ago. The comments, Mr. President, I thought, by the honorable member may have come a few weeks too late, because the honorable member, Mr. President, forgot that the by-election was some time ago, and that the party that the honorable member represents would have performed so dismally that the issues raised, unfortunately, she may not have gotten the chance to make them then. But to reduce this debate today on such a critical bill before us, to what I heard, comments such as, instead of addressing COVID-19 issues as we are, I'll get to that shortly, we're dealing with by-elections and moving to a republic. Mr. President, I feel personally that those comments were really unfortunate, because the fact is, the by-election is over. The member may not have had the chance to speak then. I don't think that this is the appropriate place to bring that kind of conversation. We have a serious matter before us today, and that is the amendment to the Central Bank Act, which, Mr. President, from what I have read, and the background to this piece of legislation, suggests that the government is very well ahead of the curve in trying to address not only fiscal issues, governance issues relative to the performance of the central bank, and being able to position this institution to be compliant, if you will, with international standards. We heard the point earlier about ensuring that our financial reporting meets the international standards that have been set for such reporting. We are aware that in this COVID environment, our institutions, Mr. President, have to respond to make sure that we can adequately drive, if you will, steer, if you will, the ship of state to continue to protect our citizens and our institutions. So, Mr. President, I begin there to suggest that I am a little disappointed, but I have come to accept, Mr. President, and to understand that I think it was Plato who says that some people speak because they have something to say, and others speak because they think they need to say something. So I very well understand that concept. But I'm here today to support the provisions before us. The acting leader of government business, in my view, would have given a clear overview on the amendments that have been made to this bill, and the background to those amendments. The fact that we're seeking at this time to ensure that the Central Bank of Barbados and its governance framework reflects the kind of modern business model, if you will, required at this point in time to take us forward. I want to focus my very short intervention, Mr. President, around Section 8 of the, well, bill before us, when it's passed, I guess we refer to it then as an act. But Section 8, in my view, which addresses relations with banks and other financial institutions, I think, Mr. President, ought to be commended. The work that has been proposed, the work that has started, in particular as it relates to non-bank financial institutions, ought to be commended. And Mr. President, as most people in this chamber are aware, have been involved in a section of this sector, namely the credit union movement, for a while. So when I see efforts being made to strengthen the credit union movement and to enable this particular sector, if you will, of the financial community to serve its members, to grow, to be strengthened, I applaud those efforts. So when I look at the work being done by the Central Bank of Barbados, a few thoughts come to mind relative to the credit union movement and what is proposed today in this amended piece of legislation. I want to highlight a few thoughts then. One has to do with the automated clearinghouse facility, and to applaud the Central Bank of Barbados and the work that we'll see going forward, I believe, being enabled now by this revised work to strengthen the ACH, to give support, if you will, to the credit union movement. I am aware, Mr. President, that the two largest credit unions in Barbados have already been approved to be included in the ACH. As you know, this is a computer-based electronic network for processing transactions. It supports both credit transfers and direct debits. And so for the credit unions, especially the larger ones at this time, but I believe, Mr. President, this may very well be extended to all 33 credit unions on the island. For our credit unions to be a part of the ACH will definitely help in the delivery of services to our members, especially as it relates to processing of checks, as it relates to individuals and business members. I think this argues well for enfranchising the credit union movement. But then again, when you put it within context, you know, a few sessions ago, I stood right here, Mr. President, as we were giving paying tribute to the former Prime Minister, Professor Owen Arthur, and I made the point then, and indulge me, if you will, Mr. President, if I maybe repeat it again, that the credit union movement has been enabled, has been strengthened primarily because of sound policies and sound programming from Barbados Labour Party administrations. Time and time again, we've seen it. I made reference to back then in 1994, 95, 96, and the work that was done to strengthen the sector. And what we're seeing now is that this administration, again, in recognizing the contribution of the credit union movement, is seeking through this amended legislation to make sure that credit unions can join the automated clearinghouse facility, that they can be a part of this network that was traditionally, Mr. President, reserved for commercial banks. But we understand that this is going to take us a step further, because it would allow us, as I said before, to provide improved services, especially especially to our members who have checking facilities, to our small business members and the like. So I really want to commend the central bank in being visionary in moving us towards this particular development for our credit union sector here. But I go further. Mr. President, to suggest that as we seek to strengthen the non-bank financial institutions, that we look now at improving the access to foreign exchange services so that our credit unions as well can have foreign exchange accounts opened and being able to provide the members these kind of services. As we know, at present, the credit union movement is not really a major player in what we would term the foreign exchange market. It is not a major contributor. Credit unions are prohibited, as you know, from issuing foreign exchange to its members and opening foreign exchange accounts. And therefore, we think that, I definitely posit that this amendment here, Part 8, in my view, which addresses how the bank will treat to non-financial institutions, should now be considered a good opportunity to bring in those, maybe the larger ones, as I said, we can try with them initially, and assist them in being a part of the foreign exchange market and playing a significant role in the foreign exchange market. And you may ask me why. Again, it is important to underscore the contribution of this movement to our financial landscape, Mr. President, to our social landscape. You know, I got the opportunity in preparing for today to take a look at what has been our contribution, if you will, for the last 25 years. I looked at the 25-year window, 1995 until current. And as a result of the policies that have been put in place by the Barbados Labour Party administration in the mid-90s and onward, we would have seen this movement, Mr. President, increasing from just about 46.5 thousand members, membership of just about 47,000, to 2020, where we boast now of having approximately 218,000 members. Now, based on the penetration rate in Barbados, with a population of about, what, 285 or 286, we're talking about a 76% penetration rate here for Barbados. Mr. President, this is second after Dominica when I look at what obtains within CARICOM, you know, being a leader within the movement and knowing what the data is and what the statistics are within the Confederation of Credit Unions. Only Dominica has a higher penetration rate, I believe, than Barbados. So we've seen that there's been significant growth. But you want to know, I would think, what's the assets under management? The assets under management would have grown from just about 200 million in 95 to today, where we have just about $2.5 billion in assets under management. Now, this is significant. So I'm making the case, therefore, that with these kinds of numbers, the growth in membership, the growth in assets, I can speak, Mr. President, to the growth in loans, the growth in savings. This is a significant demographic. And therefore, as we debate these amendments to the Central Bank Act, I am encouraged, if you will, that we have now the opportunity to make sure that the Central Bank works with this critical sector to put in place those policies, those programs that will definitely help the movement to play a greater role in the foreign exchange market, as I said before, the HCH network, you know, the ability to provide improved and enhanced services to the members, but overall to really enfranchise our membership as we seek to provide the kind of financial solutions needed in this particular time. And my third and final thought is this. I couldn't speak to the work of the credit union movement and what the Central Bank Act now and these amendments will facilitate and will allow without calling at this time and using this forum to lend my voice, Mr. President, to the support for a deposit insurance scheme. And indulge me, if you will, Mr. President, it is a secondary thought to my earlier proposals. You would recall that in 2006, we would have had the introduction of programs that would have allowed customers of commercial banks, finance companies, and trust companies to be able to benefit from a deposit insurance scheme. Mr. President, it was a laudable effort back then. In 2020, though, I'm of the view that we need now to go a step further and make sure that the credit union movement gets the opportunity to participate in this regime as well. The fact is, with the kind of data that I shared earlier, the kind of numbers I shared earlier, Mr. President, of about 218,000 members and over 2.5 billion in assets under management, you'll appreciate that there's significant exposure to risk, financial loss for these members, and therefore we have to move with alacrity to put that mechanism in place to protect our depositors. If something like this existed, Mr. President, for other types of insurance companies, one may argue that the events of the recent past may have been a bit more palatable because persons might have been able to draw on the insurance for, you know, for the deposits that they had, even though those are not deposits. But you get the point that we need to have that kind of regime, Mr. President, to help us safeguard and protect our depositors in this movement. I know of no other movement on island except maybe the church that has the number of constituents, the number of members, as is the case with the credit union movement. No other movement besides the church. The church in all its forms. So this is significant. And therefore we have now to put whatever mechanisms are needed to protect this movement. So, Mr. President, as we debate, in particular, Part 8 of this proposed act and the relationship with our financial institutions, especially the non-bank financial institutions, I want to commend the amendments that I'm seeing. I want to applaud this effort to make sure that the Central Bank of Barbados is able to have the kind of governance framework that brings it into not only a modern environment, but improves its transparency, it improves its overall operations. Instead of the thought I heard earlier about the intimation that things are secretive and all that, this, in my view, really counters that, because this is all in an effort, Mr. President, to seek to create a transparent and open regime that allows for the kind of modern governance arrangement that we would expect of our central bank. So, Mr. President, I lend my support to this bill, and I remain obliged to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Dr. Holder. Senator Greenwich.
Mr. President, I, too, would have gone through the bill, and I've come to realize as well, sir, that the bill contains numerous amendments which are aimed at strengthening the central bank's governance and its independence. There are also, sir, numerous amendments which now enable the central bank to meet the standards of central banks worldwide. However, sir, like Senator Holder, who zeroed in on a particular part, she said she was zeroing in on part 8. The section that jumped at me was actually section 17, especially 17.2. I don't know, sir, if it is the little bit still of the politician in me, but that is the section that jumped at me. And that section says, sir, subject to section 77, the board shall, with the approval of the minister, appoint a governor by instrument in writing for a period not exceeding 6 years, and who shall be eligible for reappointment. That section, sir, jumped at me. And before I elaborate on that, I want to make the point, sir, that we should not get that to mean that the governor of the central bank cannot now be removed at all within 6 years. Indeed, sir, he can still be removed for what we would call just cause. And if we looked at section 25, you see there set out in that section that he can be removed if he becomes a member of either House of Parliament, if he has been convicted by a court of an arrestable offense or other offense involving dishonesty, if he has been adjudged or otherwise declared bankrupt under a law in force in Barbados, if he is certified to be suffering from mental disorder or otherwise adjudged to be of unsound mind under a law in force in Barbados. And so, sir, yes, there are instances when he can still be dismissed. Now, sir, let me begin by saying that having looked at that particular section, I thought to myself that, you know, the government of the central bank is actually there as governor of the central bank because he is a professional and not because he is a politician. I think that that point must be made. He is there because he is a professional. And so, sir, the decision he makes and the opinion that he gives should always be his professional opinion, his independent opinion, sir. It should be based on his expertise. Not because of politics, not because of pressure, not because of self-preservation. Mr. President, sir, the governor's political leanings, if he has any, should not be allowed to trump or even to cloud the message and the information that he gives to the Barbadian public. Sir, the present, as it stands now before this particular act is passed, as it stands this minute, he is thereby what we consider to be an indefinite appointment. And it means, sir, precisely what it says, indefinite. In other words, he can be dismissed at any time by the Minister of Finance. There is nothing in the law to prevent the governor from being dismissed at the end of 1 year or at the end of 2 years. It's indefinite. And sir, it is my humble opinion that it is both embarrassing and humiliating that a governor of a central bank at that level, sir, at that level, could be abruptly dismissed without any successful recourse to the law courts. Yes, as I said, sir, he is there indefinitely, and all that means is that his tenure can be long or his tenure can be short. His position, sir, is somewhat compromised as the law presently stands. And this amendment, which we're discussing, and the one that is said I'm zeroing in on, this ushers in, sir, improved security of tenure for him. Mr. President, this central bank official, this governor of the central bank, is head of the main financial institution in this country. He's not a messenger, sir. But as the law stands this minute, he can be dismissed at the whims and the fancies of the Minister of Finance. We may not even be able to dismiss an ordinary manager of a commercial bank in that whimsical fashion that the governor of the central bank can be dismissed. And sir, as I read the section, what came home to me was that oft-quoted quotation, that statement made by no less a person than the late and the former governor of the central bank, Sir Courtney Blackman. Those famous words, that the governor of the central bank is a creature of the Minister of Finance. I couldn't help but remember those words. So true. Yes, sir. So true. Of course, sir, I know that perhaps even in this Senate, there are those of us who will say, if I were the governor of the central bank, I would be frank and I would tell it as it is, regardless of how the Minister of Finance may feel. Sir, I'm the oldest person in the Senate now, I believe. Let me say, sir, that as far as I'm concerned, that is better said than done. Sir, no matter what we say, self-preservation is in the very marrow of our bones. In the very marrow of our bones. He is indeed a creature of the Minister of Finance as it stands. I know, sir, a few years ago, I recall someone that I least expected to say this. And he said, sir, he did not take the central bank seriously any longer. And I know where he said I least expected it from, because I know where he used to work. And one of the reasons, sir, for that loss of respect could very well have been the same fact, the way in which the governor could have been sent home just because he did not do what someone else wanted him to do. So I don't want those hearing my voice to get the wrong message and to get carried away and to suggest that all of the governors of the central bank were puppets on the string of the Minister of Finance. Sir, without calling any names, let me say for the record that most of them have been extremely honest and indeed outstanding. My only criticism of some of them, sir, is that they should have been a bit more visible, a bit more instructive to the public. So I think that some of them should have addressed, sir, the accounting association that you once headed, ICAB. Some of them should have been addressing the Economic Society more often. Some of them should have been addressing financial institutions generally. I'll get to that, sir. Not only giving their quarterly reports, but having a more public face. I would like to see a bit more, even today, a bit more of that coming from the governor of the central bank. But sir, that may be wishful thinking, and I say that because I know, sir, that they can only address those associations by invitation. And it is for the associations to invite them. If they don't invite them, then they can't address them. Yes, sir, I'll get to that. Sir, I remember an occasion when a governor of the central bank gave a minister of finance all of the support that he could. I remember, sir, when the minister of finance, whenever he looked over his shoulder, the governor of the central bank was right there. I remember, sir, when the minister of finance resorted to the injudicious printing of money, he was supported by a governor of the central bank who knew better. I remember, sir, when a minister of finance said that he could see light at the end of the tunnel. The governor of the central bank said, "Me too," even though it was pitch dark at the end of the tunnel. Sir, the governor of the central bank at that time was the best thing since sliced bread. Once he lent his support to that particular Minister of Finance. And sir, when there were hard questions being asked of the performance of the government, the governor of the central bank refused to hold press conferences. Yes, I remember those days. I don't know, sir, if you recall them. I do. I do. I'm getting old, but the memory's still there, sir. Sir, but then things went from bad to worse. And the governor of the central bank said, I am not prepared to support you any further. He was unceremoniously dismissed. That is what this section is talking about. He was unceremoniously dismissed. And the governor of the central bank was forced to sue the Minister of Finance. I remember that well. And I remember you were playing cards, and some of the fellas, when they heard it, screamed and said, serve them right. And others said, it is unfair. It is unfair. That is what this section is all about. That is what this section is all about. The one that I zeroed in on, that is what it is about. Mr. President, why it is that these things happen? Why do we have to make these corrective measures? Why do we have to change the law from time to time? As I said, the memory ain't too bad. Years ago, we had men in particular, they lived in a relationship, not a marriage, in a union other than marriage, with a lady for sometimes 20 years, 25 years. And then they decide, time for change. They want to change after 20 years. No beef any longer. Try a little veal. You know? And they sent that lady back home empty-handed. Empty-handed. Sent the lady back home empty-handed after spending 20 and 25 years in that relationship. They didn't get married to her? No. No. Sent her back home. And you know the law had nothing in place to correct that. The law had nothing in place to correct that. But then the Family Law Act stepped in. And the Family Law Act said, no. If she has lived with you in a union other than marriage for 5 years or more, then she is, to all effects and purposes, she is a wife. And you have to give her something. You have to compensate her for making a homemaker's contribution. You have to do it. And you know, we also had laws not long ago where if people bought something and there was a sign that said no refunds, or there was a sign that said no returns, you couldn't take it back. You couldn't get back nothing. But then the Fair Trading Commission stepped in and said, no, can't happen. Can't happen. The point I am making, sir, is this, that sometimes it is the societal pressure. It is the societal pressure that we exert on the law which causes the law to change. It is the same thing with the central bank and the dismissal, you know. When the pressure and the outcry comes, yeah, it is like sometimes we take an egg and we put that egg in the hottest water and the shell cracks. The pressure, it cracks. And then what we have to do is to come and we have to mend that crack. This is what we are doing when we say, give him 6 years. We are mending the crack in the law. The societal pressure is such that we cannot allow this to happen again. We have to commend the government for it. There are those who will want to say the government is doing this and it's wrong, and I do not see it that way. Sorry. So, sir, as I said, there are quite a few amendments in this Central Bank Bill 2020, and the amendment which jumped at me, and I'll repeat it again, is the one that says, subject to section 77, this 17(2), the board, with the approval of the minister, may appoint a governor by instrument in writing for a period not exceeding 6 years, and who shall be eligible for reappointment. I say, sir, that that section, if nothing else, it says a lot about this administration, and I commend this bill to this honorable chamber. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you, Senator Greenwich. Senator Honey, let's take a break now. Break for lunch.
Mr. President, it was definitely exciting to hear. Pardon me? Mr. President, I'm sorry that we have to take a break at this time in these exciting contributions, and I would wish now to make a motion for us to suspend for lunch for 1 hour and 15 minutes, returning at 2 p.m.
2:30.
Returning at, I am told, 2:30 p.m., given that it is now 1:15.
Yes. The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:30 p.m. Those members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The sitting is accordingly suspended.